In the for each container, you can actually manually enter in a row set. So you don't have to wire up to a SQL server or Exchange or Excel or Access to get your data. You can actually type it in yourself, and then you can do a for each iteration through all of that data. So I want to show you how to do that. We're going to kind of build on the last video where we talked about using variables with the for each loop container. So let me create a new project. If you watched the last video, remember how slow this process was to do that the first time? Much faster the second time once it's already created one of these projects. If you didn't watch that last video, that makes no sense. So here we go. We're taking a look at the for each loop container. And there are going to be infrequent times where you want to hard code a set of data and you want to loop through it. So let's say, for example, you have handpicked a group of salespeople and you want to extract just their sales. And this doesn't come from a query. These salespeople aren't in a query. You are hand picking them. You are going to enter in the information that you want displayed. Well, the for each loop can help us out in this case here. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to the for each loop, and my collection is going to be a for each item. And so when you do the for each item, you are actually going to create the items that you want to loop through. This tends to be, like I said, kind of at the outset, not all that common. You don't usually need to use this particular iterator. So here we go. I'm going to use the columns, and you use the add button. Okay, so you add it. You don't change the name, but you change the data type here. Okay, so the name I can't really change. There's no way to do that, but I can change my data types. So I'm going to say int32. This one would be like a date, and let's make this one a Boolean. And in the editor now, it shows you a couple of things here. I'll pull up right here. You can see I've got this column highlighted, so it lists the data type down at the bottom. And I can start typing in data. So this is 10109. And column 1 is going to be Scott Wiggum. And this is going to be true, and it's got a nice little date picker here, December the 23rd. And so here is 23,785, Grant Moyle, and it's false, and it's, whatever you need to pick in here. So make that some other value, and so then that'd be Dux, Raymond, Cy, and true, and blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I have manually entered in a set, and now I can iterate through it. Okay, so I don't get to change the names of the columns. That's the one goofiness that you see right here, but I can enter the data. So here's what you're going to need to do. Now you need to use a variable to access this data. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's see what we want to do here. I'm going to keep this simple. I'm not going to bring in the data flow task yet or the execute SQL because that's like really upcoming soon. So I'm going to do the same thing that we did before, the pop-up. And because in the last video I used Visual Basic, I'm going to use C# this time. So let's do this. Now, go back to my container. Go to my variable mappings. I need to create for each column. Let me do this. Okay. So if I want to capture all of this, let me change to blue, maybe a little more visible. Create a variable for each column you want to pass, or to pass to a task. So in other words, let's say that when I iterate through each row, so like I'm starting on this particular row, when I iterate through that row, I have an execute SQL task. And the only thing that I need to extract is column 0. So I need to pass that as a parameter. I would go create a parameter of the same data type, the int32, and then I would store the value of column 0 in that data type. Now, if instead I needed to do a data flow task, and let me undo these, I needed to store the values of column 0, column 1, and column 3, so I needed those exported out, or I needed them passed in to an OLADB command transformation, then I would create 3 variables, one of a type int32, one of a type string, and one of a type date time. So the variables are going to store the scalar row value. Okay, so you probably should know that term scalar. In case you don't, let me just define here. For what we're talking about here, a scalar value is one value per row. Like for this particular row right here, the third column is a scalar value because it stores a single value in that row. It doesn't have a nested result set, for example. There aren't multiple columns within that column. That's what we mean when we say a scalar value. So you will create a variable for each scalar value that you need to use. So I have 4, and I'm going to create 4 variables because I want to use all 4. So I go to my variable mappings, and this was actually a nice piece of usability. They allow us to create a new variable directly here. So what's my scope of the variable here? I want it to be in the for each loop container. No need to have this scoped the whole thing. So this is going to be salesperson ID. Choose your namespace. I'm fine with user. I need it to match what that particular column's data type was that I want to match it to. Okay. So put a value of 0 because your numbers have to have a starting value. And this index 0, oops, sorry, I went the wrong way, maps, index number maps to column number in the collection. So remember we had column 0 is index 0, for example. So then I come down here and I want to make another variable at the for each loop container scope. This will be name, and it's a string. It maps to the 1. I want to say the next one was Boolean, was it? Is active, and I think it was Boolean, and so we put false here. As the default. We got to give it a setting here. And then next review date. Just making stuff up. Okay. And so 2009, 11, 21, for example, is my set. So when I'm working with this, what I need to know is that how these match. This is going to map up to column 0. This will map up to column 1. This maps to column 2. And sorry that I'm not aligning perfectly, but you get the idea of how they actually work. So I flip back over to my collection to make sure that column 0, 1, 2, and 3 map to the data and the data types that I want. Be nice if they were on one screen, or if I could drop it down, wouldn't it? And I'm cool. And now in my pop-up, I simply want to bring these in as readable variables. And in the script, I chose C# this time, so I'm just going to copy and paste. And I'm going to say var return string equals string.format, salesperson ID, and I'm going to do something like this. So give me just a second to do this. What was the other one? Is active and next review date 3, and essentially I'm just doing some basic string replacement. So right here I'm going to say for the 0 token I want to put the value of the variable salesperson ID. For the 1, I want to put in the name. For the 2, I want to put in the is active. And for the 3, I want to put in the next review date. And the only thing really left here is, do you want to bring these to strings? Do you want to format them in any way? C# will actually do a good job of implicitly typing these. Visual Basic would not. You would need to actually put the toString. So take a look at the code here in case you're not used to using string.format. It simply allows me to do tokenized replacement. Right? Very handy. And now I want to say system.windows.forms.messagebox.show return string. You know, a lot of folks would use a string builder to do this same thing. The string builder class could do the same thing. It's just easier in one step with string.format if you ask me. Good. I'll save this package with this video so that if you want it, you can actually see the example. I say okay, and you know, if I didn't get any typos and did everything right, we're going to see the actual data that we passed in. So it's looping through every value in the little item collection that we did, and that's all it's going to do. It's just going to keep looping through. There's Grant Moyle and ducks. Pretty easy to do. So pretty cool. The next video, I'm going to do something similar. However, we're going to store a result set in a variable, and we're going to loop through every row in the result set. So I'll see you there.